The year was 1954. Haneda Airport in Tokyo was busy, just as you'd expect for the time. A man stepped off a flight and walked toward the customs desk. By all accounts, he was perfectly ordinary, well-dressed, European-looking, probably in his 40s, polite, calm, the kind of traveler who'd been through customs a dozen times before. He handed over his passport, a seemingly routine moment. But then, something unusual happened. The customs officer examined the document, his expression slowly shifting from focused to confused. The passport looked real, official stamps, dates, and details, all perfectly legitimate, except for one thing. It was issued by a country no one had ever heard of, a place called Taured. Now, imagine the situation. The officer sitting there with a line of passengers behind him probably thought it was a mistake, a typo maybe. He called over his supervisor. They looked at the passport together. It wasn't fake. Every detail checked out. But Taured didn't exist, or at least, not in our world. When asked to clarify, the man confidently pointed to a spot on the map. He said Taured was right there, in the Pyrenees Mountains, between France and Spain. But where he saw Taured, we see Andorra. He seemed genuinely baffled when told his country didn't exist. He argued it had been there for over 1,000 years. To him, there was no question. It was real. This wasn't just some misunderstanding about geography. The man's story started to unravel in other ways. He told the officers he was in Japan on business, and even provided documentation. The company he said he worked for was real. There was an actual Japanese firm with that name. But when authorities contacted them, they had no idea who he was. It got weirder. He claimed he was staying at a hotel in Tokyo. He even had a reservation confirmation. But when officials checked with the hotel, they came up empty. No reservation under his name. By this point, the man was growing frustrated. And to be fair, wouldn't you? Imagine being told the country you were born in doesn't exist, that your employer doesn't know you, that your hotel doesn't have your reservation. From his perspective, nothing about the situation made sense. With no clear explanation, airport authorities decided to hold the man overnight. They placed him in a secure hotel room under guard. This wasn't a jail cell, it was a regular room, but with strict instructions. He was not to leave. They kept his belongings, his passport, briefcase, and papers, for further examination. Officials planned to continue their investigation the next morning, but when morning came, he was gone. The guards swore they'd been watching all night. No one had entered or exited the room, but somehow, the man from Taured had disappeared. His belongings were gone too. The passport, the documents, the briefcase, everything. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The authorities conducted a full search of the hotel and surrounding areas. They combed through security footage, questioned staff, and rechecked every possible lead. Nothing. It was as though the man had never been there. So, what happened? One of the most popular theories is that the man was from a parallel universe. The idea is that he somehow crossed into our reality, perhaps by accident, and that Taured exists in his version of the world. If that sounds far-fetched, consider this. Physicists today are actively studying the possibility of multiverses. Could this incident be evidence of one? Another theory is that the man was a time traveler, someone who slipped through time and space from a future or past version of Earth. Of course, skeptics argue that this is nothing more than an urban legend. After all, there's no concrete evidence, no official records or witnesses willing to go on the record. Some even believe it was a Cold War-era intelligence operation, a cover-up for espionage or experimental technology. But none of these theories fully explain the details: the passport, the stamps, the man's apparent sincerity. The story of the man from Taured has fascinated and puzzled people for decades. Maybe it's just a myth, a story born out of our collective desire to believe in something bigger than ourselves. Or maybe it's proof that the boundaries of our world are thinner than we think. The next time you're at an airport, watching strangers shuffle through security, Take a closer look. That traveler next to you, the one with the mysterious smile and the unusual passport, they might not be from where you think.